Welcome to the Emotional Horsemanship podcast. I am your host, Lockie Phillips, and I help deeply caring equestrians create emotionally balanced horses with science, empathy, and feel. This podcast is a safe place for anyone who desires a better future for horses and for the equestrian lifestyle. I hope that you will enjoy these solo and collaborative episodes where we enjoy a deep insight into our horses' worlds and ways in which we can make that better for them. If you love horses and are willing to do right by them, you're going to love this podcast. And I thank you for being here. This episode is the second community podcast recording. You might remember the first one a few weeks ago, where a bunch of deeply caring horse people joined me in a wide-ranging conversation after enjoying an initial webinar around the basics of horsemanship and why that's so important. You can find that episode as episode 10, Feels Like Community Coherence. This is the second of those types of podcast episodes, and it still remains an experiment. And I really, really hope you enjoy this community-style podcast where not just my voice or the voice of a carefully curated professional or colleague is heard, but also people like you. Some of these people who are on this podcast episode are totally new for me. It's the first time I ever met them. And some of them are already students or colleagues or friends, already months, weeks, or even years deep into relationship with me. So I hope you enjoy experiencing how I navigate this. This episode started with a webinar discussing science and principles and ideas around science in horsemanship relative to a new study that just came out and a discussion I had with some of my colleagues about this study. Then the episode dives off into a community Q&A. I hope you enjoy this episode. Okay. Hello, everybody. It's always a bit awkward doing podcasts because we all say hello before we hit record, then we hit record, and we have to say hello again. It always feels hammy to me every time I do it. So, hi everyone. I'm Lockie. You're all here and joining me. We have a nice little group today for this community. We have Claire, Elizabeth, Kathy, Linda, Michelle, and Robin here on the pod. And we're going to get to questions and answers and discussion a little bit later. But the first thing that I wanted to talk about is science. Science. The role of science in horsemanship remains a hot button topic for good reason, because for too long have we not listened to science around horses. There are so many fundamental elements of just human existence where the science is really behind the eight ball, in my opinion, such as mental health. We're really behind the eight ball in our understanding of the science around human mental health, let alone trying to find something in regards to horses. Tangent on that. When Caleb came into my life, my little rescue horse Caleb, I had a real come to Jesus moment, or maybe it was COVID, but I don't know. I had a come to Jesus moment where I really thought that this horse was brain damaged. Really, really thought he was either neurodivergent or brain damaged. And so I called my friend who knew him from a previous life, tried to get as much information as I could, couldn't get enough. So I went on to Google Scholar, which if we haven't gone to googlescholar.com, I believe, and you can type in any keywords into Google Scholar and whatever science is available will come up with that. And most of it is peer reviewed. You have to do a bit of weed whacking. Some of it you have to pay to view, but the most important things you don't have to pay to view. And it's a wonderful resource. Anyway, so I went to Google Scholar and I typed in something to the effect of a neurodivergence in horses or brain damage in horses. And nothing. Not a lick. And I mean, I was unemployed during COVID, so I had time to go through it. And I really went through it. Nothing. But you know what I could find? Article after article after article scientific studies about human brain damage and disabledness and the way horses can help us if we suffer from these problems. I thought, isn't that interesting? How human-centric of us, how human-centric to utilize horses for that, but never, ever let it run the other way and wonder if they've got the same problem and what we can do for them if they're brain damaged. It was all about how horses can be therapy animals for people with brain damage, which they can be wonderful for that. Not minimizing that, but I thought it was interesting that there was abundant research and studies on the human focus of that and not enough on the horse focus. And I think what I'm getting at here in this discussion with science is that science is so important. I say emotional horsemanship, science, empathy, and feel. Not because I'm a scientist, but because I'm a nerd. There's a difference. And I like the idea that someone who's seen as emotional is also able to be rational and look at fact. I think that's about balance, something about balance. If we can be emotional and factual, and those two things can coexist, occupy together. But, and this is a big but, we need to remember that a lot of science is heavily biased. Even peer-reviewed science, heavily biased. A lot of science is rudimentary. And probably the most fundamental scientific principle is the principle of questioning science and the principle of experimentation and creative improvisation, even and especially when we don't know what the facts are. All science that we have came because someone had a big idea and then went out there and tested it. So when we get people within the scientific training community practicing thought-ending principles and thought-ending behaviors around people, shutting down creative thought, shutting down people who are wanting to ask questions that go outside the science. I believe that that's fundamentally unscientific. So if we are to be scientific-led, we need to understand what that means. And it means that there are certain things that are factual. For example, dinosaurs are extinct. So is dominance theory. Let's just put that on the table. Let's just put that on the table. These are things we can understand. The world is flat, and pressure is not an evil when it's present in the training. The world is flat, positive reinforcement is a thing. Operant conditioning is a thing. We can't deny that it exists, but it's also not the be-all and end-all. But I came across something on Facebook today. A couple of friends of mine, they're both trainers, shared a article from a Dutch horse website. It's an opinion piece about a new piece of scientific study. And I'm going to read some of it to you and then discuss what I think about it and what me and my friends discussed on the comment section about it. The title of this opinion piece, based on the science, is, and this is translated from Dutch, "Do we train our horses more than necessary? New research has shown that horses have a similar learning process and that they remember an exercise just as well when it is trained every third day as when it is repeated daily. The results of this research were presented during the 14th edition of the International Society of Equitation Science Conference in Rome. How often a horse is trained is often based on the feelings of riders and trainers or on how a horse responds to what is asked. A team of scientists from Germany and Australia has found out how well horses remember a specific exercise at different time intervals. And those of you who have been students with me, do you remember me teaching the rule of threes, the magic rule of threes? Ask once, twice, three times. If you don't get it on the third time, abandon ship, don't return to it that day. Do you remember me teaching in homecoming about coming back into work 1 day on, 2 days off, 2 days on, 3 days off? Do you remember me teaching this? And I'm just saying, I just feel like it's a thing. And I had a student at that time saying, well, where does this thing that you're using come from? Well, retroactively, I've now found a piece of science that backed up what I was teaching 6 months ago. Anyway, I proceed with the article. Purpose of the investigation. Ute Koenig von Porstel head of the Department of Animal Husbandry, Behavior and Welfare at the Justus Liebig University in Gießen, Germany. Fun fact, I've spent a rather debauched period of my early 20s in and around Gießen for quite some time anyway. And her team of researchers have designed a study to investigate the optimal time interval between repeating an exercise. The aim of the study was to determine the learning speed of horses when training with different time intervals using negative reinforcement, so just basic pressure and release. Different training schedule per group. The researchers trained 39 horses aged 2 to 24 years to perform 3 unusual exercises. The first group, which consisted of 20 horses, was trained once per day, while the second group, which consisted of 19 horses, was trained once a day every third day. During these training sessions, the horses were taught to lower their heads when pressing the atlas, raise their head when pressing the neck, and take a step forward when pressing the fetlock using negative reinforcement. So pretty out there abstract things to teach a horse, but this is what they were teaching. A training session lasted, get this, 1 minute. 1 minute of training, during which 3 to 5 repetitions of each exercise were possible per training session. The success of the training was scored on a scale of 0 to 6, where 0 stands for no reaction, 1 for a little movement, etc., and going up to 6. The horse's heart rate, behavior, time required, and pressure required were also recorded. Okay, in all cases, this is the interesting part, in all cases, the horse's performance improved significantly over both training schedules, so both worked. The researchers were able to see that after 2 weeks, the horses trained daily performed slightly better than the horses trained every third day. However, no significant difference was seen between the performance of the different groups of horses at the end of the first week and at the end of the 28-day study in terms of time or pressure required for an exercise in the learning process. Also, no significant difference was seen in the progress in learning the exercises between the two groups with the same number of training sessions. The result of the study suggests that horses do not forget what they have learned when an exercise is repeated daily or on the third day. Allowing a 2-day break in between training sessions therefore not only results in a similar learning process as a daily training session, but also in a more efficient use of both the trainer's and the horse's time. Anyway, and then the researchers went on to give their thoughts. So I saw this, and my first reaction was, duh. Right? That was my first reaction. And that was also what caught my attention, because my friends who shared it, who I will keep their identity anonymous, they're both horse trainers. They also said, I'll read what they said. No shit, Sherlock. Funny that horsemen generally know this. Science is proving it, I guess. And then another friend of mine said, can someone please pay me to make a study on a horse's state the effing obvious observations of no one? I think it has legs at least 4. And then I wrote, we were just having fun, guys. We were just having fun. This is between friends. I said, I need a study to prove that horses are horses. My sample size is too small. So far, my experience is anecdotal that horses are horses. I cannot find any existing studies that prove horses are horses. So I do not take you seriously until you can prove that horses are horses. And then my friend said, count the legs and divide by 4 to confirm your sample size. Anyway, so we're kind of joking about it, but I think it points to a more serious undercurrent that's here, that a lot of science is here to confirm the obvious, but where do we draw the line there? Where do we draw the line? And when do the scientists stop listening to the horse trainers, and why? When do the scientists stop listening to probably the longest continuous scientific experiment around horses, which is the multi-generational, passed down person-to-person practice of horsemanship? You have a large sample size, international study base, it's passed down person to person, It's about experiment, look at the results. Experiment, look at the results. Experiment, look at the results. And that's horse training and horsemanship, at least the one that's passed down person to person. Why are we not taking that seriously as a science? I thought it was an interesting subject because, like my friend said, a lot of horse people seem to know this. They seem to know that giving horses time off and training less sometimes gives you more. And training every day can result in problems. One of the researchers, he said at the end of the article, overtraining is both a mental and physical problem for horses. When horses are overtrained, they begin to develop various mental problems. In addition, they can also develop physical problems with the bones, muscles, and tendons. That is why it is important to limit stresses as much as possible. I also thought that there will definitely be people out there whom, if they were to read this science, would feel set free and maybe vindicated a little that, oh, I've only got time to train every 3 days anyway. So if I'm training every 3 days and making that meaningful, my horse's rate of learning is going to be better or the same. And I also thought it was interesting that the horses who are trained every day at the horses trained every day at the 2-week mark were better than the horses trained every third day. But then after that 2-week point, the horses trained every third day went past them. And I thought, are we training for short-term results or long-term success? And this science could potentially point us in that direction. And then the researcher said, look, we need to do a lot more research on this. They also discussed what they're going to do next, what else they're going to investigate. They said, we would like to continue the research, investigate whether horses also have the same learning outcomes with longer breaks between training sessions. In the future, we also want to investigate how the learning process is influenced if other exercises are trained in between training sessions. And I thought that's really interesting. Here are researchers studying training as a modality and trying to find common threads. And they're trying to make it universal about learning. And I like that very much. Anyway, thought I'd just bring that to you. Does anyone here have a comment that they would like to add or a question about that? Just go ahead and unmute or type it into the chat.
Lockie, I was just wanted to add that, like, for a while, science has shown on the comment about the threes and recovery time. Science has been looking at human muscle recovery versus horse muscle recovery, and humans recover much, much quicker than horses do. It takes at least 3 days for horses' muscles to recover from just a moderate amount of exercise. So.
I need to speak with my friend Kathy Sierra about that because she's often told me elsewise. But that's certainly been my feeling, that bringing Sereno back into work very gently with his size and his injury history, I'll canter him for 20 seconds on both reins. He needs 2 days off after that. At this stage. Because I get on him the next day and I go, oh, no, I'm going to rest you today. I go, nope, that doesn't feel right. I know what that feeling is. That's lactic acid. That's DOMS, delayed onset muscle soreness. So, yes. Anyone else have something they'd like to add? Come on, it's okay. Only many, many, many people are going to listen to you speak. It's fine. Only hundreds of people you don't know. Okay, go ahead.
So I had put this in the chat, but why are they not looking at how horses learn from each other? Because that is a really big indicator of how quickly and how well a horse learns a lesson. My horse's baby, who was only with her until he was 6 months old, does some of her quirks with his new family, and he was only with her for 6 months.
Mm.
He will go after taking off his halter the same way that she does.
Mm.
I mean, and they weren't wearing halters at the time. Like somehow she taught him some various things about getting stuff off of him, and he remembered it. So why not look at horse to horse studies to help us with how to train horses to work with humans?
I think that's a really good point. Why aren't they? Maybe they have, and maybe we're ignorant of the research. So first preface is, if we are ignorant of the research in this moment, sincerest apologies. But I think that's really interesting. It's also really hard to study a phenomenon if we don't have a metric to measure it by. How do we create a metric of horse to horse learning? Do we even have something to measure that with? How do we measure that, right? And that's probably what stumps us. And that's what I found looking into the science of emotion, is how tricky that has been historically to research, because how do you create a metric for something you can't measure? I mean, you can measure behavior, but behavior is at best, subjective side effect of an emotional state. And one of the definitions of emotion is that it is an internal, felt, affective experience that may or may not have an external metric to measure it by. And so, how do you study something you can't see? And so, what do they have to do? They have to see it. So, we might dislike rats. I mean, I don't, unless they come into my barn. But Panksepp was attaching all sorts of things to the skulls of living rats and then measuring their brain waves in real time to watch which centers were lighting up when the rats were doing certain behaviors. It's tough. It's tough to measure everything. Claire, what say you? I haven't worked with you before. I'd love to hear your voice. What say you? Would you like to contribute something?
Hello.
Hi.
Really? Hi. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
I just signed up to listen really at this stage.
Hmm.
I have anything to contribute. Apart from, I suppose, the science needs to be accessible for people to understand and to be able to make use of it. And I think sometimes that isn't the case. I don't know if that's something that would help us use.
Claire, for someone who is committed to staying silent today, what a fabulous contribution you just made.
Well, thank you very much, Lockie.
I'm not blowing smoke up your ass. It's just fact. Fact is fact.
Go ahead.
Okay, I'll blow more smoke up your ass. Do you know how many people per week that I'm doing lessons for will say, well, I really don't know what I'm doing. And then they launch into a diatribe telling me that they know exactly what they're doing. So step number one, as I tell my students, step number one of being good with a horse, let's tell the truth. Let's tell the truth about ourselves and our horses. So are you saying, Claire, that from where you're sitting, that there's often a certain fog index with some of this science where you read it and you go cross-eyed and you're like, God damn it, do I need to work for NASA to understand some of this stuff? Is that the problem?
Yeah, I think so. I think sometimes the language is very complex. It's almost like an exclusive club. One has to have some means of translating, which is a shame, because go to all that effort to establish something, and then it just comes to a dead end if the majority of people aren't able to understand it. It's wasted.
What a fabulous contribution. I'm so glad that I encouraged you to speak. I'm so glad I did.
I go and rest now.
No. I'm gonna have you work a little harder today, perhaps. That's so true. And I think it's a story that's as old as the hills. You have the haves and the have-nots. You have the intelligentsia and you have the commoner. Yes, this is a story that's old as the hills, as old as people are. We've always had this problem. We've had the people who went to university and the people who have not. And we've got the people who are neurodivergent and the people who are neurotypical. It's old as the hills. For me, there are a few things that I've picked up to read where I've gone, oof, I feel like an idiot reading this. Okay. All right. I'm going to take it paragraph at a time. Let me read that sentence again. Do I understand it? Nope, not really. But okay, let's plow on ahead. For me personally, I've never felt upset or worried if I haven't understood what someone else is coming from. I've been able to observe someone else's intelligence, someone else's intellectual fog index, meaning they're using words and phrases and knowledge that I don't have, but I've never seen that as a weapon against me. They're just speaking from their point of view with the language that they're exposed to and that is, part of their toolkit. So I've always been able to observe someone else's difference and someone else's skill set that is better than mine with reverence and respect, even if I didn't relate to it. Even if I didn't understand it, I'm like, good for you that you can say those words and know what they mean. Good for you. Fun. Wish I could. Don't quite get it yet, but that's okay. But I've also known, and tell me if you've ever felt this, Claire or others, when someone says something smart, you feel like they're calling you stupid because maybe you didn't understand it completely. I know some people have felt that they almost take it personally. Not everyone, but sometimes I've seen the human tendency for people to feel insulted or condescended or patronized when they're in the presence of someone who has a knowledge toolkit that they don't have, and that person just speaks to their knowledge toolkit. They're not trying to be aggressive. They're not weaponizing their intellect. They're just expressing themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's important that we ask people with toolkits and knowledges that we don't have to clarify and put it into layman's terms. It's important that we develop that ability to advocate for ourselves, but also let people have their things. Let people speak to what they know. On this podcast, I had Bex Nan, who's a woman in New Zealand who's doing a lot of horse dissections at this time. And she launched into the pod using all of the Latin terminology, and I went, whoa, let me translate that for someone who might not understand what you just said. So you mean this bit to this bit to this bit? She said, yes, thank you. She's like, oh, I'm so used to speaking with vets now that I forget that not everyone knows what all this Latin means. She wasn't trying to weaponize her knowledge. She was just in full flow with her knowledge. But I'm allowed to say, oh, could you clarify? Yes, Robin, you have your hand up.
Yeah, this conversation's so interesting for me. And when we circling back to the thing you were talking about, the bias in science, for those of us who have a scientific background and look at papers and read them, we have, you have a very critical mind, and you say, well, this is purely epidemiological. You can pick up when there's a bias in the authors of the scientific article, so you dismiss it, or you confirm it if it's your own confirmation bias, right? So there's this problem with the public at large. Like, you either feel a little bit ashamed because you don't have the knowledge, especially if you're in a trainer position or a position where people are looking to you for having all the answers, and you are or you are somebody who is a scientist that's looking at things and going, this doesn't really say anything. There's so many other explanations than what the authors are actually trying to. So we just pick and choose the science that fits our confirmation bias, right? Which I think is almost worse, really. So this is an issue. How do we bring as Claire was saying, how do we bring science into something that is accessible, but also something that we can like trust?
Yes, Robin. Love that. Robin. Beautiful. Also, Kathy said into the chat that some things are not really measurable in a scientific context. Some of it is about feel and intuition, just as valid. Just as valid. Yes, Kathy, that's just as valid thing to say. And I've been saying for a while that feel and intuition and instinct is the scientific leap of faith into the dark where we don't have science illuminated yet. You know, someone, when they went to find the atom, must have suspected that there was something there we hadn't seen and measured yet. Someone must have had the intuition or the instinct that there's got to be more than what we're seeing here. Let me find more powerful tools, more deeper analysis. But in order to create those tools, they had to make this grand leap of faith. It's really like a trust fall. Has anyone ever gone to like a, I don't know, like those adult circus experiences where I remember when I was about 18, my dance college sent us to the local circus academy. Of course they did. And they got us playing with all the apparatus, and we were on the trapeze. And there's a moment in trapeze where you have to leap off the platform and grab the bar. Leap of faith. Leap of faith. And I think a lot of people are afraid to make that leap of faith. And I think it's fundamentally scientific to make a leap of faith into the unknown so that you can know what is there. You'll never know what's there if you don't leap into the unknown. So I think that's what feel and intuition is. Doesn't mean it's not scientific. It just means we're making a leap of faith into the unknown. I have screenshots saved on my computer that I have there for legal purposes and self-protection purposes. I'm going to get hate mail for saying this, but let me go there. Can I go there, guys? Am I safe here?
Yep.
These are screenshots that someone sent me from an inner circle Facebook group dedicated to science-based horse trainers, with the most horrendous, emotionally abusive, vile, hostile commentary, not just about my thoughts and feelings around horse training. And those of you who have actually seen me train a horse can attest to how innocuous it really is and how harmless it is, but also personal attacks against my person after I expressed both my reverence, respect, and concern for a certain scientific training tool. I got hate mail, I got death threats, and I kept the screenshots from these people because I thought, at this point, I need evidence. So let me retain this evidence. And then I let it be known that I was keeping the screenshots and someone was sending them to me. And as soon as that got back into the group, that Lockie's got the screenshots of what we're writing here, it all got shut down. I reached out to leaders within that scientific training community. I mean, real top names in that community. I shared the screenshots with them and I begged them to step in and to control the emotionally abusive rhetoric that was being exchanged there from their clients. I said, my clients aren't misbehaving because I wouldn't let them. If any of you ever did that, I would step in and say, you need to stop. We don't do this here. I would step in. And they refused to step in. And I've got screenshots of them refusing to step in. So I stepped back. I no longer say the name of this group. I will not use their name because if I do, they find me. And this happens. So I have screenshots. And one of the weapons they used against me was, oh, he trains with peace and love and intuition, like this. I thought, how unscientific of you. How unscientific of you. Because what do you think the father of operant conditioning, what do you think he did to think about grabbing some sea mollusks and putting them in a lab and studying their responses to food and electrodes? Do you think he did that because he already knew what he was doing? Or did he have an intuitive feel and instinct to go ahead and measure that? So I thought, how unscientific. Intuition, yes, Kathy just wrote, intuition leads to curiosity, which leads to exploration, which leads to discovery, which leads to data, which leads to discussion, which leads to fact. Anyone else have something to add? Yes, Elizabeth, would you like to unmute and speak?
Yes, I'm thinking about all of the scientists who existed at the time of Galileo, who thought that it was wrong and horrible for him to say that the world was not flat. And I think that in thinking about your question, or I guess Robin's question, how do we discern, science, what's true and what's not true? I think that before we can even begin to explore that, we have to be really dedicated to honesty, like you were saying, and that if we are not, and part of honesty is recognizing that the truth may not actually be what we wanted it to be, that the truth may not be what we hoped or expected it to be, and to be willing to, to go ahead and explore regardless of where it's going to lead us. And I think that that's, the kind of mind that we have to have when we're working with the, when we're working with the horses. And it, so I'm thinking about, honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness. And I think that we need to have all of those things and keep them with us all the time. And yeah.
Absolutely.
It's making me think about your other podcast, the second one where you guys were talking about all of the horrible training methods of the past, and moving beyond those. And somebody had to say, this isn't right. We have to do it differently. And it's hard.
Yes.
To do.
The list is long of people who discovered something who were at first made pariahs within their own scientific community for discovering that thing. Charles Darwin had a horrible time, not just against the church, but against his own peers. Horrible, really rough trot. He had a horrible time, and he's now seen as, Charles Darwin, oh my God, we wouldn't understand evolution without him. Amazing, And so the list is very long there. And so those who do not learn from their history are doomed to repeat it, are we not? I think it's a sad state of affairs when anyone who is driven by science loses the ability to explore the unknown. Just my feeling. Claire, what say you? I'm going to ask you to work a little harder here because you said something, you were so eloquent before. But what say you to all this? What say you? Oh, I'm going to ask you to unmute. Hang on. There we go.
I think following on from what Elizabeth was just saying, I think as well we have to be prepared to accept when science presents us with something new. So we felt very comfortable with one aspect of what science has been telling us, but science is always exploring and looking further. And when it comes up with something new that doesn't sit comfortably with us because it's new and different and we maybe need to change, I think that's something that we have to be open to.
Absolutely.
It's easy.
No, it's not.
Because we feel comfortable with what we know.
Have you experienced that yourself?
Oh, I imagine. I should think so several times in my life, yeah. I can't think of
You can't think of something off the bat. Yeah.
No.
You know, Claire, about 3 months ago, I made a post about dominance where I proposed, it was an opinion piece, but I proposed that some people who utilize dominance theory in the training together with a lot of violence towards the horse, that it's a cry for help. Someone who is both adhering to the concept of I'm going to dominate, to be safe, be the leader, whatever, plus a lot of unmitigated violence. I'm seeing it's not even violence that would be up for debate. Oh, was that harmful? Because there's some violence is kind of in a gray area sometimes, not all. But I'm speaking about something that you look at and you go, that's just violent. So I made a post about that, and a very high profile trainer friend of mine who's got a social media following 6 times the size of mine, blocked, unfriended, and has never spoken to me again. Thought I was targeting them. I said, whoa, not speaking about you. Very clear that you don't do this. It's very clear. Well, you know, I believe that some of my horses are the alpha of their herd. I'm like, okay, but I'm not speaking about you. They felt that I was speaking about them. I said, look, because I presented a piece of science about dominance, that it comes from, forget their names off the top of my head, but the original researchers around dominance theory observed wolf packs and was using a defunct metric to measure dominance by. They were looking for animals that were in front of the pack and that everyone consistently followed. And they brought out dominance theory, and probably because of the capitalist hellscape we live in, they presented their first findings, but said, we're going to go back and do more research. And as they turned around and did more research, their first bit of research took off like wildfire and spread during the First and Second World War. It just bloomed. Everyone said, oh, this concept of dominance. Oh, I've got to dominate. I've got to be the alpha. Yes, I am confirmed. Confirmed in my violent machinations. Confirmed. I can, because now it's scientific to be dominant. And that we see this in wolf herds. So now we can use it in animal training. Now we can use it in human leadership. And it caught on like wildfire. And then the researchers came back and said, sorry, we just disproved our first theory. It's not a thing at all with wolves. Not at all. In fact, they have a very, very fluid leadership structure. And there appears to be no alpha or beta. Sorry, but by the time they got there, it had already taken off like wildfire. And then this researcher spent the rest of his life until his death trying to claw back the damage he had done by publishing this research that was a half-finished thought. And so that's what I published, and this person has never spoken to me ever since. And subsequently has spent time speaking about open-mindedness on their own platform. And I thought, that's certainly a journey they're on. Robin just said in the chat, well, Robin, would you like to speak to it? Go ahead and unmute, speak to it.
Sorry, I'm struggling with my buttons. I said, well, what is it that makes us struggle with change, right? Whether we're scientists, and we're all scientists in a way, right? When our identities are wrapped up in the ideology we're preaching, when our nervous systems are compromised, when our communities don't feel safe for authentic exploration. They're just some.
Do you have any ideas, any potential answers for us?
I think, we need to be able to hold safe containers for stepping into the unknown, as you say, right? And we need to recognize where we're coming from and what we're bringing to it and what our past experiences, traumas. We need to have that understanding, and we need to be able to practice that in places where we don't get shamed for it, right? So that we don't have to have our identities wrapped up in this. We don't need to be so protective of thinking like we're doing here, right? There's no way we can have all of the understanding about the science that's going on in these different places, but we have a feeling of our own experience and we're able to bring that together in a safe place. And so I just feel like that this is the practice, and we need to be able to practice that across as many communities as possible, because whatever lens we're sharing, even if there's whatever community there is an element of truth in that community, right? And so for us to be able to connect to that element of truth so that, the larger mosaic of what is going on with horses and humans can be put together. And there's no way for us to do this if it's not collaborative, for sure.
Robin, would you like to take over my podcast, honestly? Like, would you like my job? I don't recommend it. Let's take a break, because congratulations, you're at the halfway point of this long episode. Today, we are blessed as horse people. How did we get so lucky to have the best horses in the world? And as learners and students of the horse, unlike 20, 10, or even 5 years ago, there are now in the industry so many options to choose from. Different methods, different teachers and coaches. We could tell a story, a negative story, about how all of this choice overwhelms us and is a bad thing. Or we could celebrate the fact that we do now have choice, because for too long, horse people like us had too little options to choose from, and the horses paid the price. You get to choose how you want to train your horse. You do not have to train like the person to your left or the person to your right. You only have to deal with who you see in the mirror and the horse in your hands. If you would like to redefine your horsemanship so that it can be softer, quieter, safer, and build for a future of deeply encouraging and fulfilling experiences with your horse, I'd like to invite you to join the Emotional Horsemanship Foundation online course. The Emotional Horsemanship Foundation online course is what started all of this movement, and it is available for you to sign up at any time, and you get lifetime access. It is a self-study course that you can pace out at your own timing, and it is the essential starting point for anybody who would like to redefine their horsemanship with emotional horsemanship. In it, I teach theory and practical exercises that are an essential foundation to begin, that allow you to make a start with a horse formed on the powerful emotional phenomena of care and nurturance, using body language rules that your horse already knows, and you just need to help them to remember. In it, you can join over 1,000 students from around the world, also studying this Emotional Horsemanship Foundation with an average of 5 out of 5 star rating. I hope to see you there. It could really change your life. It certainly changed mine, and I'm really proud of the proprietary tools you can learn there that you won't learn anywhere else. If you'd like to sign up, head over to the Emotional Horsemanship website, that's emotionalhorsemanship.com. Go to the online courses page and find the Emotional Horsemanship Foundation online course. Follow the prompts and you can sign up there at any time. Thanks for allowing me to plug my work, guys, because that's what keeps this all going. And now, let us return to this podcast episode where Robin had just asked the most divine question. I love Robin.
These different places, but we have a feeling of our own experience and we're able to bring that together in a safe place. And so I just feel like that this is the practice, and we need to be able to practice that across as many communities as possible, because whatever lens we're sharing, even if there's whatever community there is an element of truth in that community, right? And so for us to be able to connect to that element of truth so that, the larger mosaic of what is going on with horses and humans can be put together. And there's no way for us to do this if it's not collaborative, for sure.
Robin, would you like to take over my podcast? Honestly, would you like my job? I don't recommend it. That's a good job. No, I've got a good job. I'm being facetious. So are you saying that every scientist should be in psychotherapy? Analyzing their past and analyzing their biases. I mean, I think everyone should be in therapy, truly, at least for a spell of their life. I think as soon as you get your, in America, your, what is it? Your business, your LLC. The minute you get your LLC as an equestrian professional, it should come with a tax accountant and a therapist, both at the same time. It should come hand in hand. It should be like a little government package saying, welcome to the industry where everyone needs therapy. Let's make sure you're getting it so that you're not passing on your stuff to your clients or asking them to be containers for your damage, let alone the horses. Yes, I think it's really hard to exact true change because true change is painful. If you look at the brain during change, the pain centers light up. Also, the panic center, the panic system, the emotion of panic lights up. Panic is a really interesting emotional state because it mediates loss, sadness, and depression. So when I see someone struggling with change, I know they're not struggling with the new information. They're struggling with the loss of the old information. Even if that old information is information they intellectually know, they should lose it. They should drop it. They know intellectually they can sit cold and rational and explain the fact that what they're letting go of needs to be let go of, and yet the loss part of their brain lights up, that there's an active sadness around the loss of information. This actually happens during learning as well. So when you learn a new thing, a neuron detaches from its old connection and floats, and then it floats until it makes a new connection. When it floats, that is something, confusion, the experience of confusion. It's just a floating neuron. So when I hear someone say or present confusion as unscientific training, I say, I believe you. I believe that you have perhaps a poor relationship to change if you don't welcome confusion, because confusion will mediate change and learning. Momentary confusion, not chronic. So it's really interesting emotional experience for both horses and people when true change begins. I've changed so many times. I'm exhausted by change. I would just like to have a hot minute to myself over here to consolidate. But really, truly, if someone came to me tomorrow and put a big fat textbook on my desk and said, this is the new emotional science, and I opened it and said, everything you're teaching has been upgraded, Lockie, and a lot of what you were teaching you need to go back on, I'll say, great, right, let me get to work. Step 1, if you go to my foundation online course, I upgraded it last year with a video where I watched my own theory and described to the new student the parts of it which are still true to me and the parts of it which aren't. And guess what I'm doing second half of this year? I'm upgrading the entire course comprehensively with the same attitude. So I'm wondering if there's anyone else here who has some ideas around how to be a positive model for change. Go ahead and unmute.
I really appreciated what you were just reminding us about panic, and the fear and the pain that we feel when we are confronted with something that we need to change and lose the old. And, I think that tells me to be compassionate to people who are, who maybe are about to, or perhaps need to change their minds, including myself. I know you know that I have felt that way. And, so it tells me to be compassionate, and also just remember how hard it is to let go of these things that we get so comfortable with. We don't even want to go there,
I have very specific memories of being in lessons with you, Elizabeth, where I watched you in real time grapple with this process with change, and I tried, and I hope I succeeded in staying with you on that, and talking you through it, and breathing through it, and keeping you together, that your world won't end if you let go of a thought, a feeling, or a practice. Your world won't end. Something new is coming to replace it, and you're going to really enjoy that new thing. We're going to go to Michelle and then Kathy, who want to speak, but I'm just going to read out some of the comments here from the chat. So you guys are 10 times smarter than I'll ever be. Elizabeth says, we have to look at the why behind these studies. Why? Why did we study this? I mean, way to be, I said this to you yesterday, Elizabeth, but way to be like a Midwesterner, straight to the point, grand sweeping statement of clear, absolute, rounded, salt of the earth fact. I mean, 100%. And you also said to be authentic, and you stay appropriately humble and in a learner's mindset. The loss of self. And the idea is the self, that we feel like we lose ourself when we lose a practice or a piece of information that has now changed. Oh, great conversations, guys. Kathy said, to find a safe container, you need to find your tribe and build from there. Connecting to that as a start and collectively increasing your vibration. And Claire said, we need to remember that when we are approaching new topics with our horses, we need to remember this, because all the time I see on lessons, we present something new to the horse and the horse has a little mini panic about it. And I often have to speak to the client, who immediately runs to the edge of the skyscraper, ready to throw themselves off it because their horse is having a momentary moment of panic. I say, no, don't jump. It's fine. The horse will be fine. I promise you. Don't jump off the cliff. Please don't. The horse is okay. Let's keep them within threshold. They're in the orange zone, not the red. We're okay. Breathe through it. Let's go back to safety. Okay, let's try the new thing again. You present the new thing to the horse and they go, whoa, Just before getting on this call today, despite the rain, I said, if I don't do something with my horses today, I'm going to kill myself. So I went out there and I took Soreno, who really doesn't like puddles. I mean, he really doesn't like puddles. I thought, too bad, mate. You live in the Atlantic Northwest now. You're going to have to get used to the puddles. I mean, this horse was born in Sevilla and then spent the rest of his life inside during the rain. The first time this horse was turned out overnight in the storm, the house was shaking, and I looked outside with my torch, and this horse was having a rock party in a summer, just light rain. He was looking at the other horses going, we're allowed to be outside in rain, unrugged at night. This is amazing. Wow. Like, he was just running around my pastures, and my other horses were like, you need to calm down because you have no idea what's coming. Next minute, 2 Atlantic hurricanes slammed into Galicia, and Soreno is going, yeah, still fun. Oh, wow, it's wet. Wow, it's really wet. And then I opened up the door to my house where there was a roaring fire, and he looked in and he's like, oh, that looks nice. Oh boy, can I come in? I mean, he would have come and sat on our sofa, and now he doesn't like puddles. So today, I took him to a puddle, and I said, I hear you. But can you look at it? Can't look at it. Can't look at it. No, I'm going to ask you to look at it. No, don't run me over. No, don't come over the top of me. No, don't slam into me. You're allowed to have a tantrum about it over there, and I'm going to do my best not to trigger that. But I'm not going to let your panic control the training either. Heard you, love you, mean it. Can you look at the water? He said, and he looked at the water. He said, right, can we put a foot in? Nope. I said, okay. He wanted to charge over the water. I know that if I put him on a contact, rode him, he would have gone straight through it, but he would have had no connection to the water. I said, I actually need you to connect with it. I actually need you to connect with this thing. This is a 10-minute conversation before dinner. Panic, disgust, fear, confusion, all new things for him. There I am, just quietly asking him to explore it. Michelle, you've got your hand up. What would you like to add?
Talk about panic. This is where I could add, but you've all spoken so well, Robin, just about feeling safe. But the one thing I would add is to drop into your body and not always intellectualize everything that we're reading. And that panic comes in, like even now I feel it right here, and I'm speaking that's something that might be thrown out to multiple people. But
welcome to my world. Welcome to my world. It's terrifying to be in the position I'm in as a sensitive person who's introverted. Every time it's terrifying, but I show up and I keep doing it. Right?
Yeah, and the safety is here. And so to be vulnerable, to do such, but also hold the fact that it's still here. It's the both and. Two things can be true at the same time. I can be fearful, I can acknowledge, and I can still engage and connect into a conversation that's so meaningful. So I really appreciate that.
There's a Instagram page called Neurohacker that I love. I think it's Neurohacker. And they had a meme lately because they just drop golden nuggets of science every day on Neurohacker about neuroscience and specifics. And one of the things they added was that neuroplasticity will trigger rage or frustration, even if the thing that's triggering it is something you want to engage in. So let's bring down the fog index. A lot of you are nodding your heads, but maybe there's someone listening who is like, what? I didn't get that at all. So neuroplasticity, and please don't write me if I botched the layman's terms description of this. Please don't write me. I don't need to hear it. It's fine. Because I guarantee you someone will get on their typewriter and I'm like, okay, thank you. Okay. But neuroplasticity, in my botched understanding of it with the layman's terms, is flexibility of thought. It's the ability to have a thought and change it. The ability to have a focus and change it. It's any time the brain has to be flexible and agile, right? Rather than stiff and fixated. Neuroplasticity is a really important area of study where, again, we don't have enough data, in my opinion, and not enough robust exploration has been done on this 4-dimensionally yet. But I find it really interesting that though neuroplasticity is kind of the seat of creativity and learning, will apparently trigger frustration, not because you hate the thing that's triggering it, but because you love the thing. How many of us have been working with a horse? You love that horse. You even love what you're doing. But God damn, it's frustrating sometimes. Hot diggity dog, it's hard. It's hard work. And you really want to do it. And it's really challenging you. I mean, sometimes I've felt my last 2 brain cells rubbing together and I'm like, oh, it's just like a hinge with no ball bearings anymore. It's just like, you can't, rusty, frustrating, not because I hate it, but because I love it. And that's why we need to take a critical eye to frustration in our horses in training sometimes. Because sometimes the horses are frustrated, but they still want to engage. And I know too many horse people, let's say in our circle, guys, that they see their horse be frustrated for 3 seconds. They finish the training, put the horse back in the paddock, and go curl up into a fetal position and wonder why they went wrong. And meanwhile, maybe the horse was just trying to engage with something that was asking them to be flexible. and the flexibility isn't bad. Just yesterday, and I'm going to move on to someone else speaking, but just yesterday I was giving a lesson to a lovely client of mine, and they're coming back into work after a winter off, and everybody was discombobulated. Everything from rope management to position to aids to the horse's compliance. It was pretty messy. That was okay. You know, coming back into work, we're just stepping through it. And the owner, for a moment, started to believe that the horse was getting too frustrated, couldn't do it because she was too messy. And I said, okay, well, we can finish now. You can just unclip the lead rope and leave the horse free. And then you and I can dry run this technique without the horse there, right? Let's de-escalate a little bit so that you can dry run the technique without worrying what the horse is doing. You just get your nuts and bolts sorted out. Meanwhile, the horse had just spent 10 minutes basically in complete non-compliance with her, inert, not moving. She unclipped the lead rope and started dry running it. There was green grass all around the field that the horse had been trying to pull to the entire training. Guess what happened the minute she unclipped the lead rope? Yes. The horse stayed with her and followed her around at liberty while she dry ran the technique. And he was even trying to cut her off and interrupt what she was doing, like, hello, me? It's like, well, we've been trying to work with you for 10 minutes and it wasn't working. So you go over there and eat some grass. He didn't want to go away and eat some grass. He wanted to stay and work it out with her. It was really tough for him. He wanted to get in deep. He wanted to roll his sleeves up. And he's like, no, I want to figure this out with you. And she took the lead rope up thinking that he was done with her. And he was like, I'm not done with you. What are you doing? I'm just in the middle of a process. She's like, well, the process looks like you're doing nothing. He's like, yes, but it's my process. So what are you talking about? You talk about patience, so let's walk patience. It was hysterical. I wish I was recording it. We were all laughing. The person holding the phone, my client and me, watching this. I said, okay, so he's a Liberty horse, apparently, and a Reiki master. Great. Okay, good. What else is underneath the surface, you know? Yes, epigenetics. Michelle just added, we go back to what we have known from the past, then epigenetics comes in to add a layer. Do we all know what epigenetics is? Okay, so anyone who doesn't know what epigenetics is, it's an interesting piece of science that talks about the genetic code or DNA sequence. Now, please don't write me if I'm butchering this, but as I understand it, you can't change the DNA strand, but the DNA can kind of like connect in new ways, and that forms your genetic code or something like this. I am not a geneticist, but what I understand is that during our life, any strong experience or memory, particularly those related to trauma, both positive or negative, so very strong nervous system imprint, it'll actually change your genetic code to create that in your genetic system. So it'll actually change you. So for example, a thoroughbred born to race will have a certain series of experiences on the racetrack that will change their behavioral profile and tendencies forever. Those behavioral changes get coded into their genetics, and then they pass those changed genetic codes onto their offspring. Not because of their evolutionary experience, but because of their behavioral lived experience. So there's actually science for generational trauma, which is why you'll see high anxiety in some people despite them having had every opportunity in life and never have had major trauma. They've got high anxiety, doesn't belong to them. It's unresolved traumatic experiences that are generations deep. This is not just woo anymore, though I speak fluent woo. It's now science. It's not even exceptional science. It's pretty straightforward stuff. So I've got some clients who have thoroughbreds who display a lot of the same traumatic tendencies as off-the-track thoroughbreds, but this horse has never raced. But their parents did. I have a client who has a mare and her mother at home. Only 2 horses she's got. Her mare had a very horrific, and I apologize if I'm repeating this story for anyone who's heard it already. And I'm telling it with her consent because she's allowed me to tell her story. A mare whom 20 years ago, a trainer took her mare from her without her consent when she was a teenager and put a bike chain across this horse's gums and backed this horse up off the bike chain until her gums bled because this mare didn't cross a puddle when her owner asked her to. She did that without the owner's consent. And it was a hugely traumatic experience for the mare and for her owner, who loves her dearly. And she tells me this story that when the mare was getting backed up by this abuser who took control of the horse without her consent, the mare's eyes locked eyes with her, as if to say, why are you letting this happen to me? Because she stood by and did nothing. And 20 years later, she and I, this client and I, have spent a couple of years now, almost, doing deep recovery in and around the nose area. A lot of resensitization, a lot of no-touch contact to unpack the stored trauma in the nose of this mare. Her offspring, who's been raised at home, she's had every safety in the world, is also nose shy intermittently. It's been passed on. So sometimes these instincts we have, they're not ours. Something about the ancestors. Yes. Elizabeth said, I love your saying it's emotional horsemanship, not toxic positivity horsemanship. Did I say that? If I did, wow, okay. Oops. Maybe that's a bit too strong for some people, but okay. Yep, I'll own that. Yeah, it's also not atonement horsemanship. I'm not here to represent a grand apology to the horse. Yes, I have needs too in and around horses. Yes, even today, trying to get my lumps back into the pasture after dinner, I said, excuse me, I have needs. I need you to go through that gate now because there are people waiting for me in half an hour on a Zoom call. So, Sani, I know you're trying to clean up the food that Sombra left behind, but I need you to move the butt and go through the fence, please. Thank you. He said, what? I said, I have needs. Through the fence. I have needs. I have needs. Please go through the fence. I said, but can I just? I'm like, no, you can't just. I need you to go through the fence because I'm not here to apologize. And what did he say? Okay. Mm-hmm. In he went. Yes. Claire, thank you for joining us. Thank you. Would you like to add something before you depart today? Just to say goodbye. Go ahead and unmute. I'm going to help you. There you go.
Hopefully, I'll meet you all again sometime in the near future. That was a really interesting conversation. I look forward to hearing more and sharing more. And
Thank you.
And maybe having a lesson with you one day.
Oh, you're very welcome. It's a little hard to get me at this moment in time because I got a bunch of people keeping me really quite busy. Thank you all. It was lovely to meet you. And if I can say that the 2 or 3 times you did share with us today, you always shared something intelligent, to the point, and very, very clear. And I hope you felt safe enough here to share. And I hope you can expect that from us here at Team Emotional Horsemanship going forward. Safe place to share. Even those wackadoodle ideas you're not sharing with anyone, there needs to be a group chat about that in the future where I say, okay, guys, off the record, who's got a crazy idea that they're afraid to tell anyone because they think they think people are going to think they're off to the loony bin? Let's share it. Nice to meet you, Claire. Thank you for being here.
Thank
you
you
for
very
being here.
much. See you again.
See
Take
you
care.
again. Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, guys. So let's kind of begin to wrap it up, but gently, so slowly, softly. I'm not in a rush. Anyone else have a question on this topic or even off this topic that I might be able to chew on with you in the group?
I have a word that I'm curious how you feel about this.
Mhm.
2 words is emotional maturity.
Mm. You're
I asked
asking
it,
me what I think about emotional maturity.
is that too broad of a, when I think of some of the bullying that happens when people step out with different ideas than the norm, I look at that and try to do it from a lens of I've just now stepped on their toes, or I've pushed a button that is um, a little hot. But I also can look at too my reactivity. I'm completely responsible for how I take that, and I can go that through the lens of my own harm in the sense of, am I being overly sensitive, or is there a scale of emotional maturity that we're all just kind of like trying to get to, and some people just are just not interested?
Before I speak to it, would someone else like to speak to that? Kathy, go ahead and unmute. You're safe here. Go on. I know you. I know it's on the tip of your tongue. Go ahead and speak to it.
Wow. Well, I had a few things to say earlier, and then the conversation keeps going, and then it's like, oh, I could say something to that and to that and to that.
So speak. Take up some space now, Kathy. Go ahead.
Yeah. So the emotional maturity piece, speak to that. Well, those are 2 different words, right? You could break them both down. Maturity, right? And the emotional part of it. I think what you said, Michelle, about you are in control of how it feels when it comes back at you. You're right. That's your body controlling that feeling and that emotion. Are some people not ready for the conversation? Maybe not. They're ready when they're ready. Is it a maturity thing? I'm not sure if it's a maturity thing. I think it's preconceived notions and ideas of what has been, and hard to understand what you may be talking about. So I'm not sure about the word maturity, but I'm not thinking about what the definition of it is. I'm not being very articulate here, but I guess
You're in a flow state. Go with it.
I'm in a flow state. Yeah. So,
I can halter you and take you somewhere if you need me to. Let me lead you. Let me lead
lead
you
me somewhere. Yeah.
Am I hearing you say that there's something that rises in you when you hear the word maturity that makes you maybe bristle against it, or question if we're speaking to the right thing here in this discussion when that maturity piece comes up? Is that true?
That's probably true. It's the word itself, right? So I'm looking at it in the context of, say, you're trying to show, like somebody said earlier about show, don't tell. I do believe that. I totally believe that. I don't think trying to be an evangelist about what we're talking about in this safe space of what I would call people on an enlightened horsemanship path. I would say that that's who you attract. And from what I've heard from everybody that's made commentary so far, that's exactly what it is. I feel totally safe in this group. And so there is an emotional, maybe maturity about that, but it's because we're all on this path together. When you're trying to explain that to other people or tell, and they're not willing recipients, that's problematic, right? So are they not mature enough to hear it? I'm not sure maturity is the right word. And maybe it is. Maybe it's just the construct I've put around.
Maybe the construct about it is that even if maturity is the problem, and let's define maturity, but even if maturity is the problem, we should never weaponize that against someone who might have immaturity as a problem. That would be the same as taking intellect and weaponizing intellect against people who aren't intellectual. It creates resentment. So even if maturity is the issue, why don't we take a trauma-informed understanding of maturity? If we look at maturity from a trauma-informed lens, perhaps we might find some empathy there And what we could understand is if someone is, let's pick a random age, 37, and is behaving like a 6-year-old, I want to take them out to lunch and ask them when the pain started.
Mm.
Who hurt you? Who hurt you? I have a lot of female clients who, at their beginning with me, even though I'm gay, but at the beginning with me, take many sessions, weeks, months, or even years just to feel safe in the presence of a man around horses. So I'll often see a line of questioning from a client which sounds like a little girl who is frightened and asking for safety from teacher. And I know to tread very lightly there and patiently, because A, I'm not a therapist and I will not offer therapy. I'm a coach. There is a difference. But at the same time, they just need time to understand that I am safe here with me. And I've even had guests on my podcast who came back to me and said, I've never had a conversation like this with a man before around horses. That was hugely healing for me. And at the beginning of our conversation, they admitted that they felt really jarred because here was a man talking about feelings. What is going on? That's my job. I'm a woman. I talk about feelings. Why is a man doing my job? Can you imagine? So to take trauma-informed understanding and maturity, we would understand that if someone's frozen at a certain developmental stage, it's usually because something happened to them there. Right, Kathy?
Well, yes. I mean that. Yeah. So how do I put this without traumatizing everybody that's on the call?
Well,
So
just go ahead and lay it on the table, and if we need to edit it in post-production, we can.
Okay.
So go ahead.
Okay. So when I think about emotional maturity, I think about my 30-year-old son, who has been drug addicted, homeless, and incarcerated. I'm sharing this. Okay. So, and when I think about his emotional maturity of having a 10-year period in his life, and we're talking about trauma. Okay. So a period of trauma in his life, I would say probably a 10 to 11-year period where he went from being a late teenager into now a 30-year-old, and then coming back into our life, he lacks emotional maturity because of the life he's lived and the trauma he's had. And so when I think about emotional maturity, I think about that in that context. When we're talking about what we're talking about here, and I'm glad you brought the trauma piece in because that just hit me right in my body. When we're talking about what we're doing on our, so I'm taking a 180-degree turn now into the path that we're on and the emotional horsemanship journey and trying to shine the light on it. It might be more of an awareness, although it could be a maturity because there may be trauma there. And I apologize if I traumatized anybody by sharing that. But was as the first thing that came to my mind is when you said that, I immediately thought of him, and has the maturity of probably an 18-year-old at 30 because of trauma and life experience.
Thank you for trusting us with that story. I'm not a religious person, but I do pray every day. I'm not religious. I don't pray to anyone. I just pray. Well, I do pray to someone, but it's not a God. It's a friend who's gone. But I just sent a prayer up for your son. And thank you for sharing that here. And it's such an important conversation because the human and horse nervous system is more similar than it is different. Some horses are 19 going on 3. Mm-hmm. And I think, when did the pain start? when I was in Northeast Wyoming, Kim Kizia Sherrod, who is someone I need to have on the pod, she's a body worker in cowboy country and a bloody good one. My clinic host said, she's our hippie friend, they said. And it was her and her friends that came to my clinic. In Northeast Wyoming, there's this little chapter of softness in cowboy country. And Kim brought, if she's listening, hello, Kim, but I'd love to have her on the pod. She brought her 19-year-old, who's probably 21 now, Charger, quarter horse, ranch horse, barrel racer, whom she's had for a handful of years. Been there, done that ranch horse. But when you look at his body, if you have an eye for equine biomechanics and muscular development, his body tells a story of pain, compensation, getting the job done, fatigue. It's just all the muscle groups, brachiocephalicus, spinatus. It's upside down. And day one, when we got to the ridden portion, she mounted Charger and we started going through the very quiet exercises, which you guys have seen me do. If you have, it's always very quiet at the clinic. Yeah. And this horse was starting to have a meltdown, so much so that I got off my horse, gave my horse to someone, came and held Charger so that I could get her off him so that she could de-escalate the scenario. She calmed him down. 40 minutes later, she did mount him again. This is on day one. Day two, she went to the mounting block, and every time she went to the mounting block, he stepped away. Every time he stepped away. Kim approached that mounting block with the patience of a body worker and the energy of a Reiki master. And for an hour, not to wear him out, but for an hour, every time he stepped away from the mounting block, you know what she did? She brought his head into her chest and she pet his eyes. And I said to her, you didn't make the mess, but you're here to clean it up. And so she would ask him to reposition at the mounting block. She would reach up to the stirrup. He would step away. She'd take his head. She'd pet him on the eyes. For an hour, this was their dance. And I stood there transfixed. I almost forgot I had to teach a clinic. And I said, Kim's teaching the clinic now. This is a masterclass in patience. Everybody watch. And then after 15 minutes of this, I said, okay, I actually have to do something with the other people. So Kim, I'll leave you with that. And I went back to the others, kept throwing over my shoulder. She's still there, petting the eyes, repositioning, petting the eyes, repositioning. An hour later, she put a foot in the stirrup and he stood for her and she softly lowered herself into the saddle and pet him on the neck. It was astounding act in horsemanship. Just amazing. Now, Kim's a woman I think in her 60s, so she's got some life experience. And she's body worker in cowboy country. She's seen it. It was just beautiful. There was nothing that wasn't consensual about it. She was just exceedingly patient. And I said, how was this horse trained originally? She said he wasn't. He was saddled, bronked, and then ridden and worked. I said, so he's 19 and we're doing colt starting today. So that's what we did. So from the back of my ranch horse, which was lent to me, we did colt starting. I saddled up to her. She had the reins. I snapped on a lead rope. And my horse helped Charger practice stop to walk transitions. I was ponying Kim on Charger so that I would say, okay, together, 3, 2, 1, you use your gentle aid of a gentle squeeze of the leg, a soft kiss from your soft palate, and me and Sophie, the mare I was on, we'll go forwards and we'll gently use some pressure and release to ask Charger to walk forwards. And he found the most lovely soft walk, stop walk transitions. And from there, we found walk to trot. And then we found walk to trot where I then, while he was trotting, take off the lead rope. And then we did the same thing unattached at the lead rope. And he was just following Sophie. But as soon as she took him away from Sophie, he came to a dead stop. So I can't do it without Sophie. I actually don't know. 19 years old, cold starting. Maturity. Yes. Didn't I say I was going to wrap up this conversation? Once we get onto these conversations and we start telling stories, and I get this not traumatic, but this joyful remembrance of some of the beautiful acts of horsemanship I've been privileged to experience. Others do, not my own acts of heavenly horsemanship, but other people. Okay. Anyone else would like to chime in with a thought or a comment or a question? Don't be afraid if it does take us on a tangent. It can always become 2 episodes if it needs to be.
I actually was thinking about the original paper that you brought up and wondering almost if the scientists who did that study were taking, if they were taking a risk by actually doing some work to suggest that you don't need to run a horse into the ground in order to train them, and feeling grateful that they would be willing to ask that when, hopefully their work will be presented at places like veterinary schools and things like that. Because I've had some pretty horrendous horse training advice given to me by veterinarians. And, so if they're the ones who are going to be reading, papers from Google Scholar more than the average layman, I think that's really good that they're doing things like this.
I think a lot of vets are so busy, they don't have time. I had a follower on Instagram about 6 months ago from Germany say, my grandfather is an equine vet, and I'm watching your stories on ECVM, but my grandfather, who's an equine vet, never heard of it. I was like, okay, send me an email. I'll send you the PDFs from the bone room, and you can send it to your grandfather. If he's a vet, it's because if he hasn't been educating himself within the last 18 months directly from these sources. And I said, by the way, the first peer-reviewed resource on ECVM was only published last July. So if he's not within the last weeks reading, he won't know about it. You know why? Because he's too busy trying to keep horses alive. It's probably what he's doing. And you're absolutely right. These researchers are going out on a limb, depending upon what kind of horse people they're around. But if they're anywhere in and around a competitive environment and they come out with research that says you don't have to train every day, do you know how many people would push back against that? Feel like it's a personal attack? Meanwhile, they've got horses they're training every day. They would feel it's a personal attack. Yes. Elizabeth D says into the chat, dog breed intelligence is scored based on how many repetitions of a command or showing of a command is needed for the dog to learn a command with retention. Border Collies can learn most of the basic commands within 3 to 5. Poodles are the second smartest dog with 5 to 7 repetitions. Unless you're my dear little dog Mikra, who's here in my office, still has barely learned not to shit in the kitchen. So I love her. I love her. She's incredibly smart in her own ways. If you're sick, she knows right where it's sick, and she'll sit on it. Sit on it. She's not training smart. She's not behaviorism smart. I love you, Mikra, but she's not, no. And how many of us know horses that we have to run to keep up with? It's like, shit, I can't keep up with this thing. It's so fast. Yes. Okay, guys, I'm going to wind down now. I'd like to invite you all just to close us out with a thought, comment, or even a question, which I'm not going to answer, I promise. Promise I will be here all day. One at a time. Okay, I'll take Elizabeth first. Go ahead. Elizabeth and Rick. Elizabeth Ross. Go ahead.
This is really so interesting, and I don't necessarily have a question, except I think that this just you just remind me again to always keep, stay really open-minded, be willing to not be afraid of change, of challenging my own assumptions, and just, it's always being willing to just take things as they come, and just be open and honest and truthful with myself and my horses all the time. So I'm just, thank you.
Long may it continue, step by step. Beautiful. And Elizabeth D.
Strive to be less afraid of the unknown, because it could be really good. It could also be life-changing.
Thank you. Kathy.
Wow. With all of this discussion about science and being a science-minded person and working in science pretty much my entire life, what I would say now is that the more I listen to my feelings and drop into my body and into my knowing and my intuition, the better I am with my horses. And it all comes down to how emotionally I'm feeling as well, right? Because those emotions or energy stored in your body, and your knowing comes from there. And I think that's how we move forward. If we feel that way and move that way, we're going to shine a light, and we're going to find our tribe and our community amongst this crazy, crazy horse world that we're involved in.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, Michelle.
Well, I think this just is all just cultivated even more curiosity around the topics. And I will have to say it's lovely to talk about things like panic and rage like you do, because we often feel it. And once I named it, it went away. So yeah, just having more curiosity and vulnerability to step out in those places once you find your people opens up so much. It opens up so much, and it also lets that's you've been holding in just release. And I don't even know if I like the word release, but
love the word release. Yeah, I'll co-sign it with you. Go ahead, you can use it.
I'm going to use it.
Yeah. All right.
It's beautiful.
Thank you. And Linda, you've been with us this whole time, and I wanted to respect your privacy. So if you don't want to unmute and speak something, you don't have to. But if you would like to unmute and share, please do.
I did.
Hi.
And hi. It's been great to be here and listen. Very inexperienced in horses. I got my first horse at 66. And he
Congratulations.
died. Thank you. I lost him 5 years later to PSSM. And I have another Paso now, a rescue. And in my 10 years, I've experienced the dominance big time in the Paso world, and knew that it wasn't right, and have surrounded myself with some great people, and have managed to come here because this fits through Kathy and Celeste. Kathy, with the play, has just changed my Paso. And now I'm working on emotional regulation for him and me. So it's been great. This is a good place. And I lived in Spain and had my first horse as a child.
Where in Spain? Where in Spain?
Rhoda.
Where
Rhoda.
in Spain? Rhoda.
Yeah, the base near Puerto de Santa Maria, near Jerez.
Not Ronda.
No, but near Seville. Near Seville.
Near Seville. Oh, it's hotter than the seventh circle of hell down there. No wonder you left.
That's wonderful. I loved it. I had a horse out of the bull ring.
So, we need to talk. Linda, you tell me this now at the 11th hour? Oh, my word. Linda.
He was wonderful. Yeah.
What was his name?
His name was Napoleon.
Of course it was. Short man syndrome. Most Spanish horses are diminutive. Well, Linda, thank you for being here and being just a quiet presence. If you join us again next time, feel free to speak up and take up space at the table. There's so much space here for you. And I want you to know that based on what you've just told us about you, that I take you seriously, that I believe you, and you are a real and valid horse person just as much as the next person is.
Thank you. It's been a great learning curve, believe me. And but I'm finding a place for him and for me. So that's the good news. Because he came out of the showroom, so he's pretty.
What's his name now?
His name is Imperio de Cameron, but I call him.
That's impossible. You've got to have a shorter name than that.
Ham.
What do you call him? Ham. Ham?
CAM.
CAM. For a minute, I'm clutching my pearls thinking you didn't call him Ham, did you? That would be pretty hysterical. Actually, a good name for a horse if you've got a comic leaning. Cam. Well, sending a thought out to you and Cam. Be safe out there. Take it slow. Listen to him. You're going to be just fine. Thank you. All right. And Robin. Take us home, Robin.
I just want to express how much gratitude I have for this space and these conversations. Everything everyone has said here has landed in my body as truth. So I really appreciate that. And you had asked Lockie earlier in your first podcast and a little bit earlier here, what are we doing? How do we make the change? And that this is it, right? This is it. Just having these conversations that allow us to be brave, allow us to be vulnerable, allow us to be authentic, allow us to exercise our intuition without fear or shame of repercussions.
We'll call this intuition and emotional weightlifting. This is the gym. You can come over here and we can lift these emotional weights together and get brave. One story at a time. Bicep curl. Yes. And I really, really hope that this will become a fixture within the podcast. Though I'm happy if it stays small. I believe that if this podcast gains traction, it will take on a life of its own if it gains traction, because what you guys are giving voice to is the experience of, I think, most horse people now. And so it's also a voice that's at this moment in time mostly silenced or experienced in solitude only. And just to finish us off, I mean, when Michelle was saying, release and open, that's what this work has become for me. If I can indulge a moment of being personal. I mean, Kathy, I remember you came to our Ottawa clinic last year, right? I still dream about that clinic because the energy in the room and something happened there. I think not only because Canadians are the nicest people in the world and we had a very, very private environment, but also all the participants were long-term clients. So there was a certain co-creation there. But I had this moment that I needed to latently speak to my therapist about from that clinic, because at the community discussion at the end of day one, I'm sitting there on the mounting block, watching you guys hold court, and I'm thinking, this isn't just about me making a living anymore. And I went, fuck. Okay. I'm in trouble in a good way. This has now taken on a life of its own. That I'm here to surrender and serve this thing that I don't quite have words for yet. So to release and open, I am full of joy in my work. It exhausts me and it gets me out of bed in the morning at the same time. So thank you all for being here. You've all helped me beta test this style of podcast. And I'm really excited to publish it. Thank you all for being here. Now, all go ahead and unmute and say goodbye.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Nice to meet you all.
Bye. You've been listening to the Emotional Horsemanship Podcast. I am your host, Lockie Phillips, and that was the second community-themed podcast episode. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you enjoyed it, why don't you get in touch and let us know that you'd like to see more like it? Or perhaps you'd like to register your interest to join me on a recording and share in a discussion or ask your training questions. You can go to emotionalhorsemanship.com and get in touch with us via the contact page. Thank you for being here, and I look forward to seeing you next time.